line number 7, your body is your temple, and you go into issues of the war on drugs and what you call the food police. You criticize Roe versus Wade, but you don't give your opinion on abortion in that area. At least I didn't see it in the book. What's your stand on that?
Ralph, I am a pre-Vatican II Catholic, so I am absolutely opposed to abortion under all circumstances. This is a philosophical judgment. We cannot determine medically precisely when life begins. I give the benefit of the doubt at the beginning. So this book is not about my philosophy of when life begins, but I am clearly on record as being in the pro-life camp, forcefully and vehemently in the pro-life camp. Putting that aside, there is no right to an abortion in the Constitution. There's a right to privacy, but there's not a right to commit a crime under the right to privacy.
So what's the role of the government with the woman's reproductive rights?
In my opinion, the fetus is a separate individual, and that individual has rights and can command the protection of the government just as you and I. And for that reason, there could be no abortion absent due process, which would be inconceivable to demonstrate that the fetus is somehow culpable of being executed.
Well, this, the libertarian view usually is that the government shouldn't have a right to tell a woman either to have a child or not to have a child.
You are correct in that, and I part ways with a lot of my sisters and brothers who are libertarians on that issue. There is a growing pro-life group among libertarians, but many true North libertarians, of which I am one, do not recognize the fetus as an independent being and say it's the obligation of the government to keep hands off. Most of this chapter basically says in a society where a woman can execute the baby in the womb, how could a person not put whatever chemical they want into their body as long as by doing that no one else is harmed?
Well, the interesting thing about this is that you're pretty consistent, according to what most people think libertarianism is, when it comes to the war on drugs. Marijuana, heroin, cocaine, what would you do?
None of the government's business. A person has the freedom of choice. They have the right to be wrong. They have the right to impair their body. They have the right to utilize whatever substance they want in the privacy of their home as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. If it hurts a child in the home because a parent is taking it, the government can intercede. If someone gets behind a piece of heavy machinery like a train or a plane or a car under the influence of drugs, it's the same thing as driving under the influence of alcohol. It's the government's job to protect innocence from persons in that situation. But if a person utilizes recreational drugs exclusively in their own home and no one is harmed thereby, it is their choice and it is none of the government's business. If I own my own body, I can decide what to put in that body. The government can't make that decision for me.
What if the woman has a fetus in her?
That could impair the fetus. And as you know, there are cases of women, published opinions, where women have taken recreational drugs and it has affected the fetus, or the state has argued it has affected the fetus, and the woman post-birth of the child has been prosecuted. I'm not in favor of police telling us what to do with our bodies. I'm not in favor of the mayor of New York saying there's too much salt on restaurant tables. This nanny state will lead to the loss of all freedom. But if the fetus is a separate human being, and I believe it is, then that human being is the most helpless in the world, totally dependent upon the mother in whose womb she or he resides, and can command the protection of the state.
Let's take your phrase, food police. 7,000 Americans died because of contaminated food. A lot of it is contaminated seafood. Some of it is coming in from China, for example, contaminated. You really, when you go to a restaurant, you don't have the senses to detect a lot of this.
Right.
You can't taste, smell, or see botulism, for example. What role would you have for the government in regulating food for safety?
I would have no role in the government for regulating food for safety because the government is the most inefficient regulator of private behavior we have. It is heavy-handed, it is thoughtless, it breaks its own laws, it is inefficient, and it adds to the cost of everything.
The key is 7,000 die, 70,000 are sick, and many, many thousands of those are hospitalized.
Because,
how do you deal with that?
Because we rely on the government to do what it can't do.
Well, who can do it?
Well, there should be some private enterprise. There should be some entity, perhaps paid by the insurance companies that insure the restaurants, who don't want people to get sick because they'd be on the hook if somebody sued.
Why aren't they doing that now?
Because they rely on the government. When you and I go into a restaurant, as we may very well do when this wonderful interview is over, we don't think twice about the cheeseburger we're about to eat, because we assume that some bureaucrat, barely educated, ignorant in the law, nevertheless has walked in the kitchen and performed some kind of a test on the food. That doesn't work.
Well, actually, it has worked. Food has been recalled. Food has been condemned. Lives have been saved.
Well, there's a moral obligation on the part of the preparer of the food and the distributor of the food, not to put something contaminated into the food chain, so to speak.
Or how about the right to sue? If you're contaminated, you get sick. You sue the food company or the restaurant.
Absolutely.